Hello, everyone. My name is Steciuch. I'm a graduate student in the psych department in the cognitive area. Katy, Rupp, and James Mogan are also graduate students in the cognitive psych program. Today we'll be talking about CISLL's new eye tracker. It's an iLink 1000 plus system. You can see most of it here in the bottom right. There's the camera. On the left, there's the monitor that you, the experimenter, will see. Then you get to do all the fun stuff like calibrate your participant, and then they have the screen in front of them. So just some of the main points that I want to cover. We ran some preliminary experiments just to make sure that the system works. We're getting the right type of DVs and that it does track people's eyes correctly. Then I'll give an overview of the eye tracker, a list of the measures, or some of them at least, the software that came with it, like a different experiment builder, as well as a data viewer program that you get your data from. Then Katy's going to go over sort of some of the manuals on how to learn how to use the eye tracker, how to get access to how to schedule you using it, and then some frequently asked questions. The first preliminary experiment we did, we just tried to replicate Scott and colleagues 2012, and I'm not going to go into the details of it, but basically they analyzed eye movements, participants reading sentences on different emotionally valent words, as well as high and low frequency words. Their major finding was that low frequency emotionally valent words, either positive or negative, are processed faster than neutral words. So we tried to replicate their methods and get the same results that they did. So we used ePrime 2.0. Fortunately, the eye tracker does integrate pretty well with ePrime 2.0 and 3.0. So the eye tracker software came with some sample experiments that came with ePrime files, as well as their experiment builder files. So we took one of their sample experiments that has all this code and script to run the eye tracker, and we just put our sentences and materials in. And then we were able to record eye fixations for sentences presented individually. So for those of you familiar with ePrime, basically you just have, this is sort of the process of it. You have your text displays, your instructions, then your trial list. So the only thing that these sample experiments, or something you would need to add to your ePrime files, are these script files that just tell the camera when to turn on and when to turn off and when to track. So it's not too different than just making a regular ePrime experiment. Here's a video of someone's eye movements. Sort of made the red dot a little bit bigger, just so you can see it. Here's another one. This is what the participants saw. So the eye tracker did come with the data viewer, which is an extremely powerful tool to process your data. It allows you to define areas of interest before or after you collect your data. So typically there's going to be around the words of interest, the images, or maybe objects in a video. And then it generates a report based on what dependent variables you want. So what type of fixations, what type of saccades. And then importantly, it allows you to make area of interest templates, so you only have to make these once. And in fact, the program has an auto-generate areas of interest, so we'll make an area of interest around each word in the sentence, which is super handy and shaved a lot of time off analyzing the data. And then after you sort of make one of these templates for your whole experiment, as soon as you get another data file, you can just load in that template and your areas of interest are already there, so it saves a lot of time. So the measures we looked at were first fixation duration, so the first fixation within that area of interest around that word, gaze duration, which is sort of like the first set of fixations the first time they visit that area, and then total time spent in that area of interest, which is every time they came back to that. So we were able to get the same data-dependent variables that Scott and et al. Did. Some of our data matched. We didn't have enough participants. We only had about 6. We just did this in the last month, from setup to collecting data. This is what the data viewer screen looks like. You can see all the fixations of the participants on there. You might be able to see around the bolded word session, there's a yellow area of interest. And then there's saccades in there as well. But the most important part to me was getting a very easy data file. So you can ask for particular variables you want. So I just asked for 3 variables about the participant ID, the area of interest, as well as the trial labels, so you know what sentence they're looking at. And then I just asked for 3 dependent variables: the first fixation duration, the dwell time, the first run dwell time or gaze duration, and then the total time. So you can see these files are very easy to work with, and then afterwards you just have to put your independent variables for what you were manipulating in that specific trial. But it does just give you this great Excel file. The second experiment we did dealt with pictures. We presented, this is more exploratory, We presented paintings with different types of contextual information. This information varied on cohesiveness. And then we recorded eye movements when the paintings and information were presented concurrently. Again, we only had 6 participants because this was in the last few weeks. And then we also programmed scales of liking and understanding in E' 2.0. So every time they viewed the painting, afterwards they'd rated how much they liked and understood it. This is a sample material. This is a participant looking at this painting. This is from the series, the painting series, The Screen. That's just some accompanying text information from them. This is them reading it, and then afterwards they look at the painting. Here's just another example of that. But as you can see, if you just had people rate, on Likert type scales, how much do you like to understand, you're not getting all this rich information of how they're interacting with it, how many times they go between the text and the painting. So I'm very excited to use this. But here's the data viewer file for that. As you can see, I have 2 very simple areas of interest, one around the text and then one around the paintings. So for this, you can answer research questions like how often are they switching between the text and the painting. Here's that same file with the eye fixations and the saccades. So you can see they're going around it quite a bit. This was me doing it as a test, so I didn't actually read all of the text. You can see I just kind of skipped around. This also can generate heat maps, which gives you easier information to understand. So this is just where I looked at this painting. You can see I spent a lot of time looking at people's faces and the dog on the woman's lap. The eye tracker works with text and images. We were able to integrate these Likert type scales. We didn't have enough participants to do any meaningful statistical analyses, but importantly, we got the data that we wanted. So just more about the eye tracker now. It's an iLink 1000 Plus. The camera can track up to 2000 hertz when the chin rest is used, and up to 1000 hertz without the chin rest. And we also are getting an average calibration accuracy around 0.25 degrees. And both these metrics are well above the minimum required for discourse research. I'm not sure about image research that deals with image presentation, but I know with discourse, the commonly accepted minimum value is 60 hertz, and then an average calibration accuracy of ½ a degree. So you can see this eye tracker is very powerful and is well above these minimum requirements. It did come with some useful software. Of course, there's the camera program. It runs with most script files outside of E'. It works with E' 2 and 3, as well as the experiment builder it came with. So this experiment builder is a very powerful tool. It's akin to E', but it's specifically for the eye tracking program. We haven't used it yet, although we will learn it this summer. It's sort of like E', but you're just dragging pictures of different functions you want. And there's a lot of pictures, so we haven't dived into that. It did come with sample experiments as well that give you sample experiments that are the same thing in E' 2, E' 3.0, and the experiment builder. So you can do like we did, and what the manual suggests is just put your experiment into one of their samples, and it works pretty well. And again, this data viewer allows you to construct areas of interest after the data is collected. So even if you change your mind on what TVs you want, you can change it then. It's very handy. So what kind of dependent variables can you get? There's a large variety of fixation types that I was not aware of that you can define within an area of interest, within a specific trial. So you can look at first fixation durations within an area of interest, first visit to that area of interest, so all the fixations the first time they read that word, the total time looking at that area of interest or that word, how many regressions they bring back to that area of interest. Then there's a wide variety of fixations you can select based on previous fixations. So how many times did they look at the last word of the sentence and then back to your word that you're interested in? How many times did they regress to that? There's a few hundred different types of fixations that you can get, and the manual explains what each one does. There's other useful dependent variables, and there's pupil dilation, which in my field aesthetics at least, it's been shown to be a valid measure of interest. So I'm excited to use that. It's just change in pupil size when looking at a specific AOI or while their eyes are moving. Then you can also look at other useful things like saccade acceleration rates, so how fast are their eyes moving, what's the peak velocity of their movement, things I had never thought of. Some things you should know before you start running. You just want to make sure that the materials you want to work with can be constructed and used with the eye tracker. I think a rule of thumb is if it can work in E' 2.0, it can work with this eye tracker. If you want to use video files or video presentation, we're not sure. This is due to a limitation in the monitor's refresh rate. So the monitor that the participants are staring at only refreshes at 60 hertz. So if you have a video that's a higher quality than that, or you want to present some other higher quality video, you might look into getting a newer monitor. Then you also want to be aware of what your field's accepted eye tracking metrics are. So I think the minimum refresh rate and the accuracy of calibration you don't have to worry about, but you want to know like what the cutoff for eye fixations are. Some fields exclude all fixations below 50 milliseconds because they deem those like it's not meaningful. Some cut off fixations over 1 second. It just depends what you're looking at. But you can do all of this after you've collected the data, which is really nice. So some problems we ran into with participants, and luckily I was able to talk to some of Britt's colleagues, Jean-Francois and Dr. Kakinen. They just informed me that some participants just don't calibrate correctly. This could be to wearing hats, which you can just ask them to remove them, or reflective makeup. We had a problem with this last summer with another eye tracker, but like very reflective eyeshadow or bright makeup on cheeks, especially fake eyelashes. I don't think we ever got someone to calibrate that had fake eyelashes on because it's just reflecting too much light. So you can just ask them to come back at another time or just run them through the experiment, give them their credit, and know that you can't use the data. With this eye-link system, it is possible to record participants if they have thick glasses, even ones that are curved quite a bit. We had one issue with a participant that we figured out later that we could have fixed, but this requires some adjustments of the camera to like change the angle of reflection of the screen, which again is very easy, and it still records their eye movements in a similar manner, or a similar accuracy. I was also informed there's a small portion of the population that has jittery eyes that just fixate twice as often as average people do. And you don't realize that until after you've collected the data, but a lot of their fixations will be below the cutoff. We ran 6 participants, so we actually had one they were fixating twice as often, and we had to exclude a lot of their fixations, so we had to exclude them. But I think that was like less than 5% of the population does that, that's what I was told. So not that many. There's really only a few steps you have to do besides running them through the experiment. You just have to calibrate their eyes with the eye tracker. You can use a 9 or 13-point calibration, again, whichever one your field prefers. This just involves the participant looking at the center of several dots as they appear on screen. The second stage of this is validation, where the eye tracker is sort of predicting where their eyes will move, but again, they're just looking at dots on the screen. This might take 1 to 3 attempts because you want to make sure the calibration accuracy is below half a degree, which we typically get within 3 attempts. It only takes about 5 minutes in total. Between each trial, you can opt to do drift correction checks, which just presents a fixation cross in the center of the screen. So after they read each sentence, if they've shifted in the chin rest at all, or if you're not using the chin rest and the eye tracker has lost track of their eyes, it will tell you between each trial, and then you can recalibrate them if this drift correction is above 0.5 degrees of accuracy. You can just opt to recalibrate, which only takes a few minutes. Katy's going to cover the rest.
All right, thanks, Christian. So I'll be answering a couple questions for you today you might have by now at least, such as, what do I do when I run into any troubleshooting problems with the eye tracker? And if you don't have that one yet, it should definitely be on your list. But more importantly, I'm sure you'd be wondering, how do we sign up for this? How do I book this out, and how can I use this with my own research? So the first point up here is, as far as resources go, we have a plethora of those available to you. We have multiple manuals, as well as digital, physical, as well as if you notice the link down at the bottom here, we have an excellent resource, this online source where there are experts on hand, there are forums, and they have very quick response times as far as answering any of your personalized research questions for your needs. And importantly about those manuals, I've spent much of the last month condensing down the most important aspects of these manuals to just 10-page manual for you guys that we can have available for you as a PDF. And this is just going to be walking you through the steps of the beginning, calibration, all the way through the end of running your first participant and getting that data. All right, and I do have examples of that on this slide here. So it's really grainy, but that's not the point. The point is there are pictures involved. There it shows you sort of that Goldilocks range of here's the too little calibration, here's the too much, and here's the just right sort of area right in between. And so it gives you pictures of here's what it would look like in either of those scenarios, and here's a little bit of text to get you towards that middle point, to get that really good calibration, get you that good data. And then we also have, not pictured, but it's included, some sample text that we found that's really helpful in saying to your participants to get them to just sit straight and really collect that good calibration data consistently almost each time. All right. Now for your question, how do we get access to this? So we have our very own Dr. Karen Higgs here. So she'll be on hand. She'll have an email you can write in and say, this fall, how can I book this out? And she'll give you access to a Google Calendar or similar, such that it'll be electronically accessible just for ease, no more archaic coming in, writing in, scheduling for yourselves, which is excellent. This will be available again starting this fall for you guys. For those interested, just let her know. And we'll be sending out more information about training this summer or this fall coming up as far as reserving time in those eye trackers in the near future.
We thought we would bring up a couple challenges that came up in the survey, and we believe we have, okay? So one challenge is we want to have like a seminar series, sort of the show and share, but so people can talk longer, okay? And so it's a speaker series both with internal and external speakers. One challenge is the scheduling of this. It's a big challenge when you're talking across colleges and, you know, childcare, and you have all these other issues. So one challenge is how do we pick the days and times? And so people wrote in the feedback, it was annoying because you changed the times, and other people said it was annoying because you didn't change the times. So it would be, some people wanted continuity, so we knew that the first Wednesday of the month we knew we were having a brown bag. So some people wanted that. Others were like, okay, in HS we have faculty meetings on this day, and then college ed has faculty meetings on this day, and so it just was really hard. So one thing would be to brainstorm in your groups, if you can, about that issue, the timing. The other thing is the place. So we have, so far this term, this year, focused on this building. We're in Home Student Center, right? Okay, we focused on this building because it's centrally located. But others suggested that we move around to different buildings, you know? So what do you feel about that? So if you could, you know, write a little bit or talk a little bit about yourself, and then we could report back. And then another thing that came up that we haven't done very well with at all is to support research to practice. And do people have ideas about that, or do they want it? Where do you fall on that issue? And then we have to do more with less. As we cut back on financial resources, one of the backbones since I've been with this group is graduate students. So how do we support graduate students when it's not just about giving them a pop grant or a scholarship? What are some things we had 6 years ago? We had 2 GAs funded here. Now this year we're not going to have any. We had the student scholarship, 1-year scholarship that we funded. We had a certificate that you could get a certificate in interdisciplinary, and that's gone. And then we also had a research conference for graduate students across the university that hasn't happened since CISLL left in 2014, and it was like from 2009 to 2014 they had that, and you could come to this conference. So that, why am I telling you the things that you don't have is sort of think, what did they support and how could we get those needs met in some other way? Like, could we have some kind of CISLL conference for graduate students or something? You know, just think outside the box. And so how can we support graduate students?